To Chaf Gimel Lamed Aleph. We're up to the first two dots over there.
Wait, you're good here.
All right, thanks. Thanks for the confirmation. Nice to hear. Up to the first two dots. So we're talking about the lots, how they choose who is going to run up and who is going to be the one who's actually going to merit to take the who's going to be the one to merit to actually do the avodah of removing the ashes. So we said that to do is used to put one or two hands, and the Kohen would choose a starting point, choose a number, go all around, and count each one. So there we are on the first two dots of Chav Gimel Lamed Aleph. If you're going to tell me that they take off two, then of course you could do one. What's the chiddush of saying one and two? Just say two. We're talking about really one is by a healthy person, and one is by someone who is not well. So we learned so the one that's healthy could go ahead and put one, but someone who's a little weak, it's a little hard to put out one. So therefore, if there's a little, whatever the reason is, something wrong with the hand, or it's hard to put out just one hand. So therefore, he would put out two, but would still be counted as one. You would count the hands, but you count the two as one. So therefore, the counting wasn't by the fingers; it was really counting the kohanim. The way they counted the kohanim, we essentially learned previously, you can't count by head because it would cause a plague. Therefore, you count by finger. And whether you put out one or you put out two, is still counted as one. But we learned achas maitzin, they put out one. Shtaim ein maitzin, they're not allowed to put out two. So we see you're not allowed to put out two. That's talking about a healthy. We're talking about a healthy, someone that's healthy. That's one. But a sick person can even take out two. Now, if you do put out one, we still count it as one. So there's really no difference to put out one or two. It's actually making it easier for someone that's not feeling well. And you only count if someone puts out two fingers. You only count one. You don't count it as two. We say that we have a brisa that one is not supposed to go ahead and extend a third finger or a thumb because they're afraid it's going to end up cheating. Because it's like he's going to counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and he's going to get to a number. And since I want it, when I know when he's getting close to the number that he thought of, I'm going to stick out another finger and I'll win it in order to finish it up, to get the extra, the last number by myself. So it seems from here that if that's true that you could cheat, it must be the count by numbers. So if I put out two, they count 1, 2, and if the number was 2, it would fall on me. Or 1, it would only be 1. But from the fact that we're nervous about cheating, it must be we're counting the fingers, not literally the bodies or the hands. So not only that, if you go ahead and you cheat, or more than that, if you go ahead and you extend your thumb, you get lashes. The one who's appointed to do the counting is going to give lashes. No, at the end of the day, we still say that two fingers only count as one. Now, so therefore, so we have to see a different reason why. Also, we'll have to learn why the thumb is not allowed. But it's not because we're afraid that you end up cheating. Now, ma pekia, what is a pekia? Amarav, madra. It is a madra. Now, ma madra, thank you very much. What's a madra? Amar Papa, matrika, the tayai, the fsik resha. It is it's a something used by, it's a matrika, which is used by the Arabs, which the end is split. So it was used for, it's a whip. Matrika is it's a special type of whip. Amar Baya, meirish hava amina hadetana ben beiva. In the beginning, I used to think ben beiva memuna ala pekia. When someone by the name of Ben Bevai would talk about the one who's in charge of the pekia, the one in charge of amina pesila. I thought we just learned pekia means whipping. Have amina pesila. I thought it meant the wick. Now we learned that from the worn out belts and the worn out trousers of the akayin, they would use these things. They would sort of take the worn out clothing and turn them into wicks. Now, I would think that's a pekia. However, in this sense, I also learn a brisa concerning this word pekia. But not only that, but we get whipped. The mamuna would whip them with a pekia. I mean, nagda. It must be, it is lashes. Now we're back to the two dots, and now we're going back to the Mishnah, the story of the Mishnah, that there's a story that originally they would have a race, and whoever reached the top would be the one who would merit to remove the ashes for that day. However, there's a story that one pushed someone off, he fell, and he got hurt. And therefore they went on for the census. So it's dangerous. They went ahead and they changed it to a lot system, where they would count numbers. Now, on this, Tan Rabban, we learned that they both reached there at the same time. One of them got into the four cubit feet of his friend. Not al sakin. So out of anger, the kohen took a knife and stabbed him in the heart. Now, so let's finish off the story. Rav Tzaddik stood on the steps of the tabernacle. Amar Achinu Beis Yisrael Shimu, my brothers of Israel, listen. How are you? Who Amar Ki Masech Chalab Adama. We learned that if you find a slain person on the land, and then the Parsha Paraduma, then they measure which town is closer. And the elders will come out and they'll have to go ahead and they'll have to judge and they'll have to go and on Anu Almi Lahavia say who's going to break the neck of the cow. So by us, who's going to break the cow? We have a murder sitting in front of us, and who is the guilty one? Is it Jerusalem? Is the city of Jerusalem that's guilty? Or is the Beis Hamikdash? Go call when he caused the nation to burst. He caused everyone around there to burst into tears. The child, the one of the slayed kind came and he said, he found that he was sort of like convulsion. I mean, he wasn't dead yet. He still had a little bit of life in him. In his son that got stabbed. He said, he sort of accepted the punishment on him, and he said, this should be a kapara for my son. The dying b'nei mefarer, but then very coldly, very, very cold, he still said, but since he's still alive, leitnit masakin. The sakin is not tummy, so you can remove it and not have to deal with a sakin which is tummy. Now, this is very callous. His own son's dead and he's worrying about the knife. So L'madcha, this teaches us that the status of a kli, the fact if a kli is going to be tahar, if the kli is going to be tameh, was more of an issue to them than the death of his own son. And we know that in the times of the first Beis Hamikdash, there was definitely, if this took place in the second Beis Hamikdash, there's definitely a indifference to spilling of blood, and that's what it says by Menashe, the king of Menashe, that he killed innocent blood till Jerusalem was filled with blood. Okay, now after that unfortunate story, we're going to have to go back to. We have a big question though on the Mishnah. The Mishnah claims that the reason why we changed it was because someone was pushed off and broke his leg. Which one was first? If you tell me that was the shvichas damim, that the case of the killing was first, if because of someone getting killed, they didn't change the minds of the powers to be in the Beis Hamikdash, to change it to a lottery system. Then what? Because then someone broke his foot. That somehow got them going. If a killing didn't get it, why would breaking a foot make them change their mind? It must be that the story of breaking the foot was first, and then they changed it. Now, but wait a minute. If someone broke their foot and they changed the system to a lottery, then why is anyone running up the ramp and ending up with a murder? Why ring up the ramp? What's the race? There's no such system left in the Beis Hamikdash. It has to be that the case of shvichas dam, the case of murder, was first. And first, the powers to be thought of a murder. They didn't think a murder was intentional, was because of the whole system. They thought it was a one-time incident. They never thought that someone's going to murder another murder will take place in the Beis Hamikdash. Since they saw that and then someone got murdered, and after someone got murdered, someone broke their foot. Now they're seeing a bit of there's a thread here. There's a bit of, obviously, there's an issue with the system in place. Therefore, they would change it. Tikin Rabban and Paisa. Therefore, they went ahead and they established a lottery. Okay, now we're going to continue. We're going back to that story, going to a bit of a Gadatan to explain the story of the murder. Rav Tzaddik Amali Sa'ulam v'Amar. Rav Tzaddik stood on the stairs of the Ulam and said, Achenu Beis Yisrael, Shimu. My brothers of Bnei Yisrael, listen, Harayu Omer ki Masech Chalab Adama, when you find a slain body on the ground, Anan Al Min Lahavi. Then he started going into by us. So over there in a regular case, the Torah tells us about is that in a regular case, if you find it in the city, you go ahead and you measure which city is closest, and then the elders of the city that's closest have to go down and atone for it. But in the case of the Beis Hamikdash, Al-Ir, is it on the city, Al-Azarais, or is it on or it's on the Beis Hamikdash? Yishlayim Bas Asay Agala Rufihi. But wait, there's a question here that. If there was such a case ever took place that outside the walls of Yerushalayim there found a body to be slain, would the elders of Yerushalayim be obligated to go out and bring and go through the Agla Rufa process? Latani, we learned Asar Devarim Nemar B'Yerushalayim Zu Achas Man, that there are what was it 4? That there were 10 statements about Yerushalayim. This is one of them. That now we're on the top of Chaf Gimel Amud Beis. Eini Mivia Agla Rufa. That one of the halachas about Yerushalayim was Eini Mivia Egla Rufa. That Yerushalayim was not obligated to ever bring an Egla Rufa in case we found to have a slain. In case, unfortunately, there's ever a slain body found outside the walls. And one of the reasons is because really Yerushalayim belonged to nobody. No one's responsible for Yerushalayim. It belongs to the entire Klal Yisrael, so no one's guilty above anyone else. There's really no one responsible to take care of it. But another question is, the whole idea of Egel Rufa is that we don't know who killed him, so we don't know who's responsible. If we don't know who's responsible, we say that it falls on the closest city because they should have, escorted their guests out. And over here we know who killed him. There was a Kain who killed another Kain. No, the whole reason wasn't talking about halacha. He was just trying to invoke the people's grief, and he's only trying to bring them closer to do tshuva. And it was just a technique, a speaker's technique to get everyone to break down and crying, so people should actually feel remorse. We'll continue in the Gemara. Yeah, so the father of the child came and saw that he was still, he was still alive. He was at the edge of death, but his body was still convulsing. He was still there was still sort of blood pumping. Now, that, and he said that my child is still alive, and it should be a kapara. Okay, I accept, the message. I accept the death from Kadosh Baruch Hu. However, he's still not dead. Let's at least remove the knife and not have to deal with Tumas Mace. And that we learned that it was that the idea of they're more concerned about the purity of vessels than murder. I'll ask you a question. They just want to know practically what took place in that generation. Was it that murder was trivialized? Murder became very cheap in their eyes. Human blood became very cheap in their eyes, but Taras Kalim didn't change, meaning the status of murder was lowered, but they always held a very high regard for Tevilas Kalim. No, Shvichas Damim was never really changed. Shvichas Damim, the idea of murder was terrible. That they never, no one looked at Shvichas Damim as simple. Everyone understood how it's terrible. We know how bad it was. However, for whatever the reason, the generation, when it came to purity of vessels, that stringency was skyrocketed. So that's really not so bad anymore. Meaning, it's a little callous of a father to think about it. But at the end of the day, for some reason, that generation was that generation was trained to think that purity of Kalim above all else, not saying that murder was any less than any other generation. So what is it? So what's the answer? Tashma, Talmuda, from the fact that the end of the Brisa, he finished off with the pasuk of Menashe, right? That's what we learned before. Gam dam naki shavach Menashe. That also Menashe spilled innocent blood. Shema mina shvichas dam hu dizal. We see that we're trying to apply from. We bring a proof that Menashe just killed left, right, and center. He wiped out the entire city of Yerushalayim. There's blood flowing all over. So we see from there in those generations that whatever it was, whatever the reason was, that innocent murder was trivialized, and they really did not have any regard for human life. The Taras Kalim Kaim Kaima. And Taras Kalim stayed where it was. So therefore, in this specific case, murder was lowered down. Taras Kalim, the purity of Kalim, was left standing, and therefore the father was more worried about the purity of the Kalim than a death. Tan Rabbanan. Now we continue on. Tan Rabbanan Upashat V'lavash Begadim Achem V'Hitzi Esadeshan. Now, when it comes to removing the ashes, the Torah writes Upashat, and he should take off his garments. And he should put on new garments. And he should take out the ashes. Shamani kederach yom kippurim. So this is a brisa. That Shamani kederach yom kippurim. I understand that this is like the way of Yom Kippur. Shepoished big day kodesh v'loiv day big day chol. That on Yom Kippur, that he had to the kohen had to go ahead, and the kohen gadol removed his clothing, changed his clothing. So also over here, we will think that the kohen will go ahead, that he'll change his clothing, like on Yom Kippur, that the kohen, in our case, when it came to the ashes, he would remove his holy vestments and put on non-sacred garments. You put on garments which are not meant for avodah, meaning it would be garments that you cannot fulfill regular temple service with. But in this case, you're allowed to use it. Now, this has big implications. We'll see in a minute what that means. That fact that it could very well be that they didn't need holy vestments for the service of removing the ashes, meaning, i.e., it's not really a temple service. However, the Brisa continues that he would remove the clothing, and he would wear other clothing. That there's a comparison. It says beged that he took off. It says beged where he put on the new clothing. So there's a connection between the two. Now, from the fact that together we're going to compare the malal on big day kodesh, afkan big day kodesh. However, no, both of them were big day kodesh. They were both garments that you were able to do avodah with. They both were anointed to be used. So if so, what's the other teaching to tell me? If there's no difference between the two clothing, why even telling us? Or at least why calling it other clothing? He's putting on one pair, and he's taking off one pair. He's putting on another pair. What's the other one? They're equal in status. Teaches would seem to teach us that they're different in status. So what? But apparently the Brisa just finished off saying that they were both usable for avodah. So Pechusin Mehen. The answer is no. They're lower quality. You're able to use them for avodah, and he don't want to dirty his main set of clothing. Remember, we're dealing with ashes, extremely black and soot. So therefore, he would wear clothing which are lesser quality, still able to use for avodah, but it's lesser quality. Now, that's one way to learn it. According to Rabbi Lezer, it's not coming to teach you. Achem is not going on clothing altogether. It's telling you that the Kaihanim of a Baal Mum, meaning there's some type of physical blemish that really does not let him do the Avodah, it was permitted for them to remove the ashes. This would also tell us, in this case, according to Rabbi Lezer, that removing the ashes was not a full temple service, because the Kohanim with the blemish were allowed to do it. Usually, Kohanim with blemish couldn't do avodah. They can't shech. They can't light the menorah. They can't do any of the avodah. But from here, we see that the removal of the ashes, at least a part of the process of removal of ashes, did not represent a full avodah. Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and go through this brisa. So Amar Acherim Pechusim. So Acherim, that Tanakama understood, the word Acherim didn't mean to say that they put on garments which were not sanctified for the base of Mikdash. Rather, they put on lesser quality. This is very similar to a brisa that was taught. It was taught in the school of Rabbi Shmuel. The Tanya de Rabbi Shmuel was taught in the school of Rabbi Shmuel. It's very simple. clothing that were used in the kitchen to cook that a servant used to cook for his master, you don't go ahead and you bring that out to the dinner and serve and pour. Over here, talking about pouring the cup for his master. Meaning, if the chef is not the one who's walking around, being the waiter. The waiter has his set of clothing, which is a much higher standard than the chef that really can wear whatever he wants in the kitchen, because of course it gets dirty. That makes sense. So whoever's removing the ashes is going to get dirty. Therefore, he wore lesser quality clothing. So Acherim is talking about lesser quality clothing. It's very similar to how they taught in the school of Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shlakish, now, so let's go back to the Brisa for a minute. According in the Brisa, Rabbi Lazar learned that it was the Acherim was going on priests who the Kohanim who were that had a blemish, and the first Tana, the Tanakama held, that's talking about lesser quality clothing. Now, we want to know exactly how far did this machlekes go between the first Tana and Rabbi Lazar. Now, Rabbi Shlakish says that just like meaning we have the machlekes between the two would be that could a priest that has this would be the question: could a priest that has a blemish do the service with the ashes, do the Trumas Hadeshin? According to the Tanakama, he cannot. Achem is not going on that. It's talking about less clothing. The other holds that you could. Okay, now says Rav Shlakish, we're going to have a machlekes we're going to have an argument in what state of which part of removal do they say this? According to Rav Shlakish, there are two parts. Now there are two parts apparently to the avodah of removal of ashes. There was the actual scooping it out, where they go to the base of Mikdash and they would scoop out the ashes. Then they'd have the removal process, taking it from the base of Mikdash. I think they put it. I'm pretty sure they threw it under the base of Mikdash. I mean, maybe you learned this previously. I'm pretty sure they threw it under the Mizbeach. But whatever the case is, there's the scooping and the removal, two different parts. According to Rav Shlakish, according to Rav Shlakish, the Tanakama held that a coin with a blemish can't do the scooping, nor could he do the removal. But that the Rabbi Lazar will hold he could do both. Rabbi Lazar could do the removal, and Rabbi Lazar, according to Rabbi Lazar, he could also do the actual scooping, which would technically be potentially a higher state of avodah, because that's the actual scooping off that's the first step, which would be potentially a higher state. Now, to the point where Rabbi Yochanan Omer, machlekes ba'itza, abarama derakal avodahi, that Rabbi Yochanan holds that machlekes, if a coin with a blemish between Tanakama and Rabbi Lazar is only on the carrying out, is the carrying out process where you carry it out of the camp, or you throw it under the actual mizbeach. That is where the machlekes takes place. That the Tanakama holds that no, it has to be a full-fledged eligible kohen, while the Rabbi Lazar holds that no, even a kohen with a blemish. However, when it comes to actual scooping off the mizbeach, that everyone agrees. In such a case, it has to be a kohen without a blemish. So now we have a machlekes between Rav Shlakish as well and Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Shlakish holds that the Rabbi Lazar holds that a kohen with a blemish could do any part of the process, the scooping and the carrying out. Rabbi Yochanan holds no, it has to be. Rabbi Yochanan holds that it has to be only the second part, the latter part, the part we're carrying out where we have a machlekes. But, however, everyone agrees that when it comes to scooping out, that a kohen with a blemish will not be eligible to do it. My time is Shlakish. What's the reason for Shlakish? Why does Shlakish hold the machlekes is on both parts? Meaning, according to Rav Shlakish, it's a bigger chiddush. According to Rav Shlakish, the way he learns Rabbi Lazar is that a kohen with a blemish can even scoop it, which would technically, which Rabbi Yochanan argues with. My time is Rav Shlakish. If you really think that it's an avodah, that Trumas Hadeshin is a full-fledged avodah, including the scooping, and therefore a kohen with a blemish should be disallowed. Does it make sense? Is there an avodah that you could just wear two garments with? Because the Torah says that the Torah writes that that the kohen should wear linen a linen shirt, and he should wear linen pants, and he should remove their dashin. It sounds like all a kohen really has to wear is pants and a shirt. He doesn't have to wear the hat and the belt. So Rav Shlakish is saying, now there is no avodah in the Beis Mikdash that permits a kohen to just wear a shirt and not there's no avodah in the Beis Mikdash that a kohen does not have to wear the belt and the hat. If he doesn't have to wear a belt and a hat, it must be it's not a full-fledged avodah. So that's Rav Shlakish's proof. Rabbi Yochanan, so what does Rabbi Yochanan do with that? apparently it's not an avodah. So then, according to Rabbi, well, how could Rabbi Yochanan would be wrong, and the Tan and Rabbi Lazar should be holding that even for the scooping is not part of the avodah. Therefore, a kohen with a blemish would be permitted. Rabbi Yochanan is what he's doing with this pasuk. Rabbi Yochanan says, okay, so the Torah wrote pants and shirt. Don't worry, the Torah also meant to include a belt and a hat. Now, okay, that's how he learns it. That he doesn't hold any significance in the fact that the Torah left out a belt and a hat. Now, the Gemara asks if the Torah really requires all four garments according to Rabbi Yochanan, midevad. Why does it say? Why does it point out these two psukim particularly? These two words. So there must. I said before, there's no meaning. There must be meaning. Why is the Torah taking pants and a pants and a shirt and leaving out the belt and the hat? Now, so we learn something from it. Says Rabbi Yochanan, midevad midik midasai, that the linen garment, meaning linen shirt, it has to be his size. It has to fit him. That's what we learn from here. Midday is a measurement. Nechtan sevad, and it's supposed to be linen trousers. Like Tanya, we learn from the question. We learn from it the following: how do we know that the pants and the clothing have to be against bare flesh? There could be nothing in between it. That so we are learning things from the fact that the Torah left out the belt and the Torah did not write anything about the belt and hat because there's nothing to learn from there. It wrote the shirt and the pants, which is learning two things out from each one particularly. We have the midevad is teaching us that it has to be a specific measurement, has to fit the kohen perfectly, and then also we have that it has to be against his flesh, and there come nothing in between. Rav Shlakish, how does Shlakish learn those two things? Rav Shlakish is saying that the pasuk just leaves out, just writes pants and shirt to teach us that it's not a real avodah. So how does he know about it has to be the perfect measurement, which Rabbi Yochanan learns from this pasuk? And how do you know that there could be that bare flesh does not, that it has, that the clothing of kohen has to be against bare flesh? Okay, so Shlach says it has to be perfect measurement. It says midah. That's extra. No matter what you say, you don't have to use the word midah. Therefore, that teaches us has to be perfect measurement. So here, devar kodim mechnasayim al basari nafka. Al basari says on his flesh. You didn't have to say on his flesh. You just have to say yes, wear pants and a shirt. And then from there he derives the fact that it's not a real avodah because the Torah left out the hat and the belt. So why did they have to write al basari? They teach us the same thing as Rabbi Yochanan. So there's no question there. Maybe this machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Rosh Lakish is equal to a different machlekes tanam. Now, which a machlekes tanam, Rabbi Yochanan and Rosh Lakish was really amram. Therefore, it's a machlekes tanam. Al basari, the Torah writes al basari on his flesh. Matam leimer yilbash. So why does the Torah write yilbash? Now it's extra. Lahavim stefes va'avnei l'harama divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So where the pasuk writes michsei vad yilbash al basari. Why it should just say michsei vad al basari? He should be wearing pants, linen trousers on his flesh. Why does it say yilbash? And he should put on trousers and wear them on his flesh. So we learn from there. That extra word is coming to tell you that you need, it comes to include the belt and the hat. That's Rav Yehuda. That no, Rabbi Yosef learns that this comes to Yilbash means to tell you that the clothing Kohen Gadol wearing Yom Kippur could be used afterwards for Kohen Hadya. So we see from here. Okay, we're going to continue. So hold on, give me a minute. I'm Rabbi. Say Shuvas B'davar. That there are two ways to refute Rav Daisa's understanding that Yilbash is coming to teach you that coming to include that the Kohen God, the clothing of Kohen Gadol wearing Yom Kippur could be used by a regular Kohen Hadya. I'm Rabbi. Say Shuvas B'davar. The Avnei Shel Kohen Gadol use Avnei Shel Kohen Hadya. Number one, this is a machlekes previously. I believe I vaguely remember giving this over in Daf Yomi as well, 2 years ago at least, that the belt of a Kohen Gadol is not the same belt as a Kohen Hadya. That's number one. So therefore, it's impossible for a Kohen Gadol's clothing to be worn by a Kohen Hadya. What do you mean? The clothing which is used by the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur in the Kodesh Kedashim, it can't be used for a more, not mundane, but it's a lower level avodah. Right, the overall halacha is that something which says kedusha has to go up. You can't lower it. Therefore, what's the yilbash? According to Rabbi, the Rabbi says is coming to include the worn-out garments. Now, the last thing is sham. he's supposed to place them there. We learn from there that when it comes to Yom Kippur, and when it comes to the halachas of Yom Kippur on the Torah, it says you should leave them there. We learned them also; they have to be put away, so they cannot be they cannot go ahead and be worn afterwards anyway. So Rav Daisa do it. Rav Daisa held that Yilbash is coming to teach you that the clothing of Kohen Gadol could be that he wore in Yom Kippur. The four, right? He only went into the Holy of Holies wearing the four begadim, of the regular Kohen. Rav Daisa Omer. So we refuted it. Number one is that there's different type of clothing for Kohen Gadol and the regular Kohen. Number two is that it has to go higher. Things that are holy can only go on a higher level. They can't be lowered. And the vayda of a regular Kohen is obviously going to be lower than the vayda of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. And number three, we said that it says elsewhere, they have to be put away, they have to be stored. So number one, he holds that they could be used for a Kohen Hadiyah. Whatever the case is, the size didn't make a difference. They cannot be used for next Yom Kippur, but they could be used for a regular what's it called? They could be used for a regular avodah. Okay, let us continue on. The truth is, as far as much as I prepared, but let's go on, because I just realized we're smack right in the middle of it. Because we're still left off. We said originally we had a machlekes, Rav Shlakish and Rabbi Yechanan, of whether Rebbe Lazar and the Tanakama, Rebbe Lazar holds if a kohen could do if a kohen who has a blemish, has a mum, could do the scooping of the actual Truma Sedeshin. Rav Shlakish held that he could, according to Rebbe Lazar, and Rabbi Yechanan said he could not. Rabbi Yechanan agreed that that's not allowed. So now we also said that's a machlekes Tanaim, and that's how we got into Reb Daisa. We had a machlekes between Reb Daisa and we had a machlekes between Reb Daisa and a Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda when it came to what Yilbash meant. And so, but we have yet to connect the two. What's the machlekes? Well, what's the connection? My lab b'hakim ifigli. So now we're going back to what we're talking about. So what is the machlekes between the two Tanam? What's the machlekes between Rav Daisa and Rabbi Yehuda on the word of Yilbash? This is what is going on. That according to Rabbi Yehuda, that he says that Yilbash, that is going on all four garments, he holds that the removal of the ashes is a full avodah. While Rav Daisa holds that Yilbash comes and teaches you. He learned something else from Yilbash. He teaches you that happens to be that a kohen could end up using the Kohen Gadol's clothing could be used for something else. So he must learn that it's not going that the avodah of the removal of the ashes, the service of removal of the ashes, was not a full avodah, and therefore he could go ahead and actually he could go ahead and a kohen with the mum could remove it. Right? Because again, Rabbi Yehuda held that Yilbash comes to include wearing of the belt and the hat, because he held it was a full avodah. So therefore, he held that the blemish can't do any part of it. While Rav Daisa is going like Rav Shlakish, saying that it's that at least in the words of Rabbi Lazar, there's nothing going on. It's not a avodah at all. So like no, the kuli alma avodah. Everyone holds that is avodah. That Rav Daisa and Rav Yehuda both really hold the advice. What's machlekes? Marsav v'tzricha kro l'Rabbi, or Marsav v'tzricha kro l'Rabbi. That Rabbi Yehuda holds that the extra part of the Yilbash coming to teach you, we need to teach you a belt and a hat. While Rabbi Lazar holds that no, for sure you need four garments. It's an avodah. There's nothing to talk about. It's obvious that the removal of the ashes for sure needs all four. You don't need anything extra in the Torah to teach you that the removal of the ashes requires also a belt and a hat. So therefore, it's extra. So what's come to extras come to teach you that it could be used for it could be used for the avodah of Yom Kippur. Okay, I think,
Rabbi.
Yeah,
I've lost my place on the page. Could you please tell me again where we are?
No, so we just turned. Sorry, I should have said that we just turned to the top of Chaf Dalet Amud Aleph. All right, and we're stopping. I'm stopping over here. I'm by Bayi Reb Oven, which is about. So Chaf Dalet Amud Aleph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines down. That's where we're going to stop.